morning. Good morning and welcome to the November the 10th, 2011 meeting of the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. And glad to see you're here. And there's speaking cards over on the table over there. And if you do not wish to speak, but you have questions pertaining to the flood control operations and that sort of thing, and you don't want to speak, there's a form over there that you can fill out, put your questions on it, and the staff will either mail you the answer to your questions, or you can call the staff anytime on the phone and talk to them about any solutions that you may have or ideas you may have pertaining to the operation, and get answers to your questions with them. And they'll set up an appointment if you want, and they'll come out and talk to you. The main thing that we want to do is be sure that everybody understands what we're doing. And we're going to try our utmost to see that we respond to every question that you have. And we'll just do the best that we possibly can. With that, I need a motion for the agenda approval.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Before I go too much further, we have two alternates sitting here at the table also. Ed Bryant is an alternate for Reclamation District 900. Tom is for Reclamation District 537. And you can ask questions of these guys after the meeting, but during the meeting they're not involved in it at this time because they're alternates. We have public comments on matters not on the agenda. Anything that you have, a public comment that's not on the agenda, we'll answer or try to answer at this time. Okay? The approval of the October the 13th, 2011 minutes. I need a motion.
Second move.
It's been moved and seconded that the October the 13th minutes be approved as read. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 4 on the agenda is a review of the year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This report reflects the end of the first fiscal quarter of the year, and it's marked by a significant increase in the construction on the Rivers and CHP Academy projects. We had about $3.6 million worth of expenditures for those projects and other projects related, and offsetting revenues from the construction funding agreement of $2.06 million. This trend will continue to about the end of November and early December, at which point the projects will have demobilized and completed for the season by that time. In other financial news, we wrote off about $71,000 worth of uncollectible assessments, mostly related to entities such as the post office. And we expect the new zero land value direct billings to go out next Tuesday. And that's the end of the report.
You're going to have to speak up just a little bit. I can. Can you hear him?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Speak up just a little bit, please.
And that'll be the end of the report for this month. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
None. Questions, Bill? Ken? No. Thank you for the report. West Sacramento Area Flood Control Project updates.
Okay. Could you put the slide on, please? The purpose of today's presentation is to further educate and inform both the board and the public on the process and schedule for advancing the Southport Sacramento River Early Implementation Project. We also want to further assure the public that West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency is evaluating all feasible options to minimize impacts on people and property as a result of this project. Some of the highlights for today's presentation, we want to go over program and project goals. We want to discuss the board's role in the EIP process. We want to go over elements of the project that are outside of the board's discretion and control. We want to highlight some of those areas. We also want to talk about technical information on levee design process and go over the milestone, have an overview of our upcoming milestones. Next slide, please. I want to put into perspective on how we got to where we are at this point in our process for the program. Talk about some of the history and some of the milestones that we've achieved. Basically, I think the flood protection program really rose to prominence back in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. And that really heightened everyone's awareness of flood protection and the potential damages. The city really got engaged in 2006 along with the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency and started to take action. We hired a team of consultants to assist us through the process of analyzing and evaluating our flood protection system. And we ended up with some key reports that I've highlighted up here on the slide. The first bullet is the problem identification report completed for the entire levee system protecting the city. That was completed in 2008. A resulting report is the alternatives analysis report, and that evaluated the problems that we identified within the system and developed alternatives for correcting those deficiencies. That report was completed in 2009, and both of those reports are on our website. Essentially, utilizing that information, we developed the strategy of worst first strategy for repairing our system. We partnered with the state under their early implementation program to advance levee improvements as quickly as possible to reduce risk to the city. And that's to do that in advance of the study that we're currently underway with the Army Corps of Engineers and the State Department of Water Resources, which is the General Reevaluation Report. That process, initiated in 2009, isn't scheduled to be completed until early 2015. So in the meantime, we're advancing levee improvements as quickly as we can. The third bullet you see up there is our first early implementation project that we completed, the I Street project. That was completed in 2008. And that project really allowed our team to cut our teeth on understanding the process that we have to go through, the very complicated process of dealing with the Army Corps and the multiple state agencies and the regulatory agencies that we deal with to get these projects from design into construction. We further advanced 2 additional projects, the CHP Academy and the Rivers projects that we're in construction on now, and I want to give a little bit of update on those 2 projects. The CHP Academy project, currently they're completing concrete slope protection work along this is for the the Sacramento bypass on the south levee. So that work is going well, and they expect to complete that concrete work next week. They're also working on embankment operations, and that's ongoing, and they expect to complete that work by right around November 18th. We'll also have the tree removals, which has been we've been updating the board on for quite some time. This is to help on the PG&E pole relocation. So that work is going on right now. All the trees that need to be removed will be by the end of this week, and that'll allow for PG&E to come in and relocate those poles. We're hoping they come in mid December or so timeframe so they don't get in the way of our contractor. So we're coordinating that work now. On the Rivers project, the embankment is basically completed of the levee fill. They'll be working on base rocking the levee road, the crown of the road, or the crown of the levee. They will start working on the pedestrian access pathways very soon. I think starting next week, they'll work for the next several weeks on those aspects. And then ultimately, they'll perform the paving operations on both the levee road and the pedestrian pathways. That work could be a little problematic due to weather, and we'll work very closely with the contractor to, look at windows of time where we're getting good weather, so we'll get a good paving job out there. So those projects are nearing completion, as Mark outlined. We expect to have both of those projects wrapped up by the end of December. The Rivers, we may be bringing another contract to the board for the plantings, the mitigation plantings that will occur, and those can go throughout the winter. So that'll be coming your way in the near future. After we identified these 3 EIPs, we designed them, we're in construction, we're completing them, then we targeted the next riskiest area of our city, and that was the Southport Sacramento River Levee Improvement Project. That's the project we'll be talking about in more detail today. Next slide, please. A couple of other projects that our team is very much engaged on. We're working very closely with the Corps and the state on the Yolo bypass slip repairs. The first repair was completed in 2009. The repair on the north side was just completed this month. They're doing basic cleanup operations now. That project went very well, so that one's done. And as we identified to the board last month, there's a new slip just south of the 2009 repair. It's about 500 linear feet or so, right, Ken? The state and the Corps have declared an emergency situation so that they can get in and get the work done outside of some of the regulatory constraints. So that work should be starting very soon. We're hoping it starts this week or early next week. And we'll be tracking that project very closely. We're also working with the Corps and the state on the Sacramento Bank Protection Project, the Setback levee in Southport. That project hasn't gone as well as we would have liked. As we've reported earlier to the board, the contractor experienced saturated soil conditions after the high river conditions that we had this spring, and it took a lot of time for them to develop ways to continue on with the project. So they lost at least a month or so of good construction weather to complete that job. So what they're doing now, they're going to winterize that project, build the tie-in locations up to the existing elevations of the levee, and basically winterize the project and come back next spring. So we're working very closely to ensure that that project is winterized properly. And then lastly, and most importantly, we're working on the general reevaluation report. As I've spoken many times, this is the document that will ultimately lead to congressional authorization for our program. We're estimating completion in early 2015. We're looking at ways to work closely with the state and the Corps to try to accelerate that process. And we're just really focusing on trying to get that process underway and get that report completed so that we could have our federal authorization for our program. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ken to talk about some of the details of the Southport Early Implementation Project.
Okay. Is this even though it's on or not? I guess. Okay. Our goals for the Southport EIP is, obviously to protect safety and public health and minimize impacts to the community as much as possible. We've selected this project based on repairing the highest risk sites, and this was the next one in line. So it is the highest risk site that we have remaining. And our objective here is to select the least cost alternative that it achieves public safety goals and complies with federal and state regulations. Next slide. In order to have a complete project, we have federal and state levee design criteria that we have to meet. And any project we build has to meet all these in order to be accepted and so the basic elements are freeboard. There's a water surface in the river at the 200-year event. We have to be a certain number of feet. I think it's 3 feet above of that level. So that's just based on basic hydrology, and we have to be above that. Most of our levees in Southport actually have adequate freeboard. There's a few spots where it's pretty close, where we might have to improve them a little bit, but for the most part, we have adequate freeboard. But we would any levee we would design would have that. Erosion, that entire reach of levee, because those are basically sand levees, have always had erosion problems. We've had numerous sack bank projects and even our own projects to deal with the erosion on the water side. And so any fix that we do would have to have a long-term solution to the erosion, the ongoing erosion problems. They obviously need to be stable, so the materials you use to build the levee or fix the levee need to be stable when your project is done. And then we have the underseepage where we have layers underneath of basically sandy, gravelly materials under the levees that we have to intercept and stop the seepage from coming underneath the levees. We have vegetation primarily on the water side, some on the land side, but primarily on the water side. The Corps does not, under their current guidelines, does not allow that vegetation, so we would have to remove that vegetation for any fix that we did on the existing levee. That vegetation would have to be removed in order to comply with the federal requirements. Then geometry. Most of the levees in Southport do not meet the standards in terms of on both land side and water side. Most of our water side, we need to have a 2-to-1 slope on the water side. Most of them are considerably steeper than that. And then on the land side, we need 3-to-1, and most of them are steeper than that as well. So, next slide. This is just a review of because this is basically a state local cost share. The feds were getting federal credits, but we don't actually have federal dollars that are involved in this project. So it's the cost share is, in order for us to be able to stretch our dollars, we need to work with the state to maximize the state's share and get as many miles of this build as we can. And so they range from 50 to 90%, and you start at 50%, and then you add these various features that bring your cost share up. Open space, recreation, any state facilities that are within the project area, and then setback levies, and then disadvantage areas. If there's a formula for whether or not your area is economically disadvantaged, and we really took advantage of that in the north. We stretched our dollars to our maximum in the north and ended up with a very favorable cost share. We don't qualify for that in Southport. We don't have the disadvantage, so that won't be something we can take advantage of. In addition to that, we need to consider federal credits. There are federal credits that come from us that get applied to our cost share when the feds finally come in and take over. There will be credits for the project we've done, and we have to select a project that would have been their federal choice, or if we select something different, then they will pay for what they would have spent on what would have been their choice. So we have to look carefully at that. Next slide. Now our role, the WSAFCA role in these EIPs, is First of all, to select projects that utilize our available funds to improve the highest risk reaches of levee in advance of the Corps coming along and taking over construction once the project is authorized and the GRR is completed. So we provide the local, through our assessments, provide the local share of the funds necessary for design and construction of these projects. And that's in order to meet the 200-year level of protection mandated by the state plan of flood control. So urban areas they have to meet that 200-year level of protection within a certain number of years. We design our projects that provide the maximum reduction in flood risk for the local funds invested, but at the same time considering the impacts on the community and on local landowners. And then we serve as a forum for public information engagement to allow public input into the process. Next slide. So this is just a typical, we're going to go through some of the criteria and some of the solutions. This is just a typical levee. We want to, like I said, we want a 3-to-1 land side slope. We want a 2-to-1 water side slope. This graphic doesn't necessarily represent that, but that's what we're trying to achieve. The vegetation on the water side wouldn't be allowed under core criteria. Okay, and if you go to the next slide, this is some of the typical deficiencies that occur in various reaches. They don't all occur everywhere, but we do have some of these that exist in some of the reaches. So everything from height to which we generally don't have much of a problem with, but then our geometry and our unstable slopes, we do have that. We have through seepage because they're sand levees. We get a lot of through seepage, which is why we built those seepage berms back in the 90s. And then our under seepage is one of the bigger problems, as well as waterside erosion are two big problems that we're having to deal with to get these levels up to 200-year level of protection. Next slide. And here are some factors that limit use of in-place measures. So local conditions like soil layer thickness, so the clay layer that you're looking for to prevent water from coming back up and coming through the soil. The thickness of that really determines whether or not a cutoff well can work, whether or not a relief well can work. It determines the size of your seepage berms. So we're looking at local conditions. That's why we've been doing all the borings. We've gotten a lot of borings, and we've taken a lot of additional borings to make sure that we can accurately represent what those foundation conditions are. For a cutoff wall, it depends on the soil type, and then you need a soil, like clay layer, to tie into at the bottom of the cutoff wall. So the wall has to have a soil that it can actually tie into in order to cut off the seepage coming through. And if you have large particles like gravels and cobbles and large stuff, you can actually get in a situation where the slurry wall simply won't work. You can't actually penetrate that in order to cut off the under seepage. And that's in a recent case up in Yuba City, I believe it was. They actually had to stop a project because they ran into those cobbles and it started deflecting the augers, and the project wasn't working. So, next slide. Okay, this is just an example of what would happen if you tried to put in a relief well without a confining layer, a clay layer, because basically the relief well works if your clay layer is too thin. And I might just want to go to let me see if the next slide. No, this is all right. If your confining layer is too thin, if that clay layer is too thin, that's where a relief well works. It'll basically, you're just organizing the boils. You're allowing the water to come up through your relief wells rather than finding its own path and creating a boil. And your spacing on your relief wells will determine, you put enough to relieve that pressure to the point where it's no longer a problem and it won't penetrate through that clay layer. If you don't have that confining layer, in other words, if you just have sand down to depth, then the relief well serves no purpose because there's no clay layer you're trying to leave through. The seepage comes through everywhere, and the relief well would not change the upward pressure on that. Slurry wall works well if you have a good, solid, deep layer somewhere down below there, and you can actually cut off the water coming through. Then a slurry wall works really well. But as I said before, if you have trouble getting to that clay layer because of gravel layers or cobble layers, then it becomes problematic, because when you start getting in, a standard slurry wall goes up to maybe 80 feet with the backhoe method that they typically use. And then to go beyond that, you have to start using augers, and the augers, when they start running into those gravelly, cobbly layers, can actually start to deflect, and then you don't have a continuous wall. It can actually cause the wall to not be continuous. And so you do not have a wall that serves the purpose you designed it for, so you could spend a lot of money and not accomplish anything. So that's a lot of what determines whether or not what fix you use. Okay, next slide. Now, looking at what factors can cause the levee template to be shifted landward. In other words, having to get away from the existing levee. And some of those are waterside slopes and the erosion. We talked about the erosion. If you have to move away from the levee, then you would do that. Or rapid drawdown, which is basically, if you think about the possibility of the levee on the opposite side failing, upstream or downstream, but somewhere, or a just sudden reduction in releases, then you can get rapid drawdown where the material, the levee is saturated, and then all of a sudden the river goes down, and that saturated soil is not stable, and so it tends to develop slips. And then, of course, our vegetation that doesn't meet the Corps' current criteria. Next slide. So this is kind of an example of a levee slope where you have erosion, and it cuts in your slope is impacted by the erosion, and so you would have to move the levee back away from that. And if you go to the next slide, you can see you would shift the template landward in order to get away from that erosion. So you take your theoretical levee slope and slope it down there, and you just move back far enough to where your levee is stable at that point. Next slide. And the same thing with the rapid drawdown. It's almost the same as the erosion. Oh, next slide. Okay. And on this, the same thing. If you have the rapid drawdown and it becomes unstable, you need to move your levee template back to where you have enough levee section that rapid drawdown could fail and still not impact your levee section. Next slide. And that just kind of shows how it would move. So basically it's the same thing whether you're talking about rapid drawdown, erosion, vegetation. Even we have to do a seismic analysis, so we have to analyze how the levee would perform if you have an earthquake. For all of these, the typical solution, well, there's a couple solutions, but one standard solution is just to move the levee away from the existing levee so that it would become stable. You can remove rock and vegetation. You can reslope on the water side. You can reconstruct the toe on the water side. There's a lot of things you can do on the one hand, and those are all extremely expensive. Once you start working into the existing vegetation and start working in the water on the toe, you run into a lot much more expensive solutions than simply just moving the levee over. So we would have to compare those costs with our other costs, the cost of actually moving the levee over. Next slide. And then for most of these, where a slurry wall is not the right solution, frequently a seepage berm is a good solution. And a seepage berm basically takes that water pressure that's coming underneath the levee and trying to come back up on the land side, and it just simply extends the path long enough, and the longer you go, the more you dissipate those pressures over a larger area. And so you reach a point at which you reach an acceptable factor of safety. And the depth of those steepage berms is obviously deeper at the levee and becomes more shallow as you move away from the levee. And typically is about a third of the height of the levee for the depth. The width of them, they extend out anywhere from 100 to 400 feet, depending on how much pressure you're trying to relieve and what the soil conditions are underneath. So where a sluice wall is not a fix, then this is a good fix, but that does require a fair amount of real estate. And so basically our geotechnical conditions are going to determine what fixes will and will not work in each location. And then we'll select the fix that eliminates all these deficiencies, because you can't just fix some of them. You have to fix all of them in order to get certified. And we have to meet the criteria for all 6 of those standards. So, next slide. Now I'll turn it back over to Mike, and he can start going over the task order 3.
Okay. Well, our hope and intent was to show the public and the board the many factors that we need to evaluate in order to ultimately select a preferred alternative for correcting all these levee deficiencies that we have. So we just wanted to give the public a perspective of all the various analyses that are currently underway. We continue to enhance our data acquisition and analysis as we move forward in this process. So our intent today was to highlight that fact, that we're moving as quickly as we can, but there's many factors that influence, the analyses that we have to take on. And we're looking to, and the reason we're going through this exhaustive process is to minimize impacts to adjacent properties and to the citizens of West Sacramento. So that's what we're working on. Excuse me. Task order number 3 on this slide, which I wanted to highlight. This is a continuous analysis of these various scope items that we continue to bring through the design process, and ultimately in next month we'll be able to achieve bringing our findings to this board and to the public. As part of the task order 3 process, we're developing 15% plans for 2 project alternatives with cost opinions. The 15% design and estimated cost will come to the board in January. We're also beginning our environmental documentation process. We held 2 scoping meetings to date. Our team is working on the administrative draft, and we should be getting that. That's an internal document. We should be receiving that within a month or 2. So we're looking forward to that. So we're continuing the processes that we need in order to bring this project forward. And like I said, next month we'll have our technical team, Michael Vecchio with HDR, Rick Reinhardt with MBK Engineers, and other staff. They'll be doing the bulk of the presentation next week. So it'll be very technical. It'll show where we're at in our analysis of all these various scoping items, how they influence the ultimate selection of the preferred alternative. So we're looking forward to bringing that information to the board next month. Next slide, please. So what I want to overview is our projected milestones so that the board and the public understand what's coming their way very soon. So like I said, next month at this board meeting, which will be held here at City Hall, we'll be holding these meetings here for the foreseeable future. We'll be presenting task order number 3 analysis to the board. In January is when we'll bring the 15% design and cost opinions, and we'll also bring, for the board's consideration, the approval of task order number 4. So that's the task where the team will take all the work we've developed to date and start moving forward on a design of one preferred alternative. The board staff will make a recommendation in February of what that preferred alternative is, and that'll be under the board's consideration at that period in time. So in February of 2012 is when we expect to bring our recommendations on a preferred alternative, seek board's approval or direction on a change to that preferred alternative, and then direction on how to proceed into the 60% design process. In April, assuming we get that direction approvals to move forward, we expect 60% design to be completed right around April, May timeframe. That's when we'll have enough information to know what the footprint of that levee improvement project will be and what the impacts on adjacent properties are. And it'll determine what type of real estate acquisitions we need to move forward with, whether it be easements or fee title or whatnot. So we'll have definition at that period in time. That's when we'll begin the appraisal process. So our team will we'll have appraisers on board already that will seek direction from the board on. We'll engage in the appraisal process. So the appraiser will contact the property owners, let them know we're beginning the appraisal process. They'll select a time to meet and meet on the property and start that process. Next slide, please. So throughout next year, we'll be going through our design process. We'll be initiating our real estate acquisition process. We'll be working on all our environmental documentation process, our permitting process. So we'll have a lot of work underway in 2012. We expect our environmental document to be completed by the end of 2012 so that we could take that to the board in January of 2013 for certification. At that time, we'll also have our 100% design completed. So we'll bring both of those elements to the board for approval in January of 2013. Through March through August, which is a fairly long period of time, but there's a lot of time for the federal and state regulatory approvals that we need to receive in order to move forward to construction. That's when we see those approvals happening per our schedule. We need all of those approvals before we could initiate construction on a project. We anticipate in September of 2013 having a construction contract, so we will have gone out to bid, we will have received bids for construction, and we'll take a construction contract to this board for approval in September of 2013. So it's looking like, per our schedule, at the earliest for one phase of the project to begin construction would be the latter part of 2013. In the meantime, we'll be working with all the utility companies to do the necessary utility relocations in order for our contractor to come in and do the work that they need to do on the levees. So that's the time frame that we see the process moving forward. Next slide, please. What I want to highlight to the public in the audience and whoever will see this as it'll be televised, we encourage the public to come to these monthly board meetings. They're the second Thursday of every month at 10:30. They'll be held here at City Hall for the foreseeable future. So we encourage the public to use this opportunity to come and hear information, educate themselves, and talk to the board at that time. We'll be holding a public meeting in January. We've targeted the 26th. It'll be an evening meeting. We'll probably do it either here at City Hall or across the street, where we present in more detail, not more detail, but more time for the public to ask questions about the 15% designs and the cost opinions and whatever other information they would like to ask at that time. So it'll be a venue for a better interaction with the public, so they can, not at a formal meeting like this, but a meeting that they can ask questions, get answers, and receive information from our technical team. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, we encourage the public to call myself or Ken or anybody else that they would like to as part of the WSAFCA team to initiate one-on-one meetings, to come in, see the information we have, ask questions, and maybe in a one-on-one setting, they may be more comfortable to receive that information. So we want to put that offer out, and we encourage the public to take us up on that offer. Next slide, please. So this concludes our presentation. We hope it may have answered questions, at least for timeframes of where we see the process rolling out. So I think at this time, I'll turn it back to the board.
We have, pardon me, we have one request, pardon me, for a speaker, and that's Buck.
Good morning. Nice presentation, Mike. You board members, you have a job to do, and that's to help them make the right decision. I also have a job to do, and that's to protect what I've worked for so that you'll take the least amount of property that you have to finish this project. I know all about the eminent domain and the fair market value deal because I just went through that a few years ago when the city of West Sacramento turned Sacramento loose to put a sewer line in. At the beginning of the day, they're all sweetsy, but at the end of the day, the landowner gets taken advantage of. So just keep that in mind for later on down the road. Thank you.
We have another speaker, Karen.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Michael. That was very well done. I have a couple of questions. First, in your flood protection staff report, there's a reference to staff having completed guidelines for alternatives that will be carried through 15% complete design. This is at the bottom of the first page. Where would we find that so that we might review that? Is that something Michael can direct us to?
Yes, I can provide that information to you.
That would be great. If you could, we'd really appreciate it. And second, on page 2 of your staff report, I see that there was a 2-day BOSC. I don't know what BOSC is, B-O-S-C.
That's the Board of Senior Consultants.
Okay. We weren't invited to that meeting. Was that open to the general public?
No, that's a technical meeting. The Board of Senior Consultants is mandated by the Army Corps. It's a safety assurance review process that we hire these technical experts to come in and evaluate our information to ensure the safety to the public, essentially.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask that if for future meetings such as this, that the public be given an opportunity to participate. I think that's something of great interest. And if the process is open, lacking the technical data that you have access to, our input, of course, is of less value because we don't know enough to ask the right questions. So I'd like to make a specific request that these meetings be available. And certainly, you can have limits on participation or questions. We know you've got time schedules to meet as well. So I'd like to make that specific request. And then at the very end of the staff report today, there's a reference to upcoming meetings. One is with the NGO environmental stakeholders. I don't know who those are, but again, I would like to request that we be given notice of the time and place and be allowed to sit in on that meeting so that we may acquaint ourselves with all of the issues connected with that project. So we think that would give better public participation and an opportunity for us to understand what the problems are too, which is always valuable. You also have a DWR executives meeting on 11/16. Again, I would request that that meeting be open to the public. And then you have a core interim progress review tentatively scheduled for November 17. Again, I'd like to request that the public be allowed to sit in on these meetings as needed, and that there be notice given of the time and place, and not just of these meetings that are on this sheet, but of upcoming meetings, so that we all can be informed and have an idea of what your constraints are and issues are. So that's a formal request to you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for listening to it. And then there was one thing I didn't understand in the slides. It said that you can get more state money if you do a setback levy, and that, as I read the slide, the amount of money available from the state would go from 20% to 40% if you were using a setback levy. If we could see the slide again, you could all see. And I'm just not sure what is being said here and wanted to find out. Can you see that slide again, Michael?
Can you put that up?
Thanks.
The intent of that slide was to show the various components of how the state set up their EIP guidelines, their cost-sharing guidelines. And there's various aspects of the guidelines. They encourage certain, or they give you higher cost share for certain elements of a project. I'm trying to find mine here. I got it right here. So your question was about setback levies from 20%. So that's a bump in the state cost share of between 20 and 40% of what they would cost share into a project for that component.
Okay, so let's just take Reach B of the Southport project. Does this mean that if you design it to include a setback area, the money you get from the state could go from 20% to 40%?
It means they would cost share at a higher percentage with a setback levy than versus maybe an adjacent levy.
So whatever your percentage was before, say it was 55%, it could increase anywhere from 20 to 40%. So it would go from 55 up to 75 or 90, you know.
So there's a financial incentive to select a setback levy alternative. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're hearing.
So it would be financial, though?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay, and then, and is that an issue in Reach B?
It's an issue for the entire program. The higher cost share we could get from the state, the more levies we can build to protect the entire city.
And then on the habitat, open space, and recreation, is that a component that will play a role in the Southport project? And then I am specifically interested in Reach B.
Yes.
And how will that play out in Reach B?
It's the same as a setback levy. The state cost shares at an incremental increase for these components. So if you have more of these components, the higher the state cost share you get.
Okay, but I'm probably asking just a little more specific question if I could, which is in the Reach B segment, that's not all that big a reach of this project. Are there places where you contemplate adding habitat, open space, or recreation such that the percent cost share that you get from the state would increase?
I don't have that level of detail that I could give to you. I think next month when we bring our task order 3 analysis presentation to the board, we'll have more information for different components of the various alternatives we're evaluating.
So that isn't something that you're thinking about right now?
It's something we're thinking about for the entire 6 miles of the project. All these components, wherever they factor in, wherever they can be achieved throughout the 6 miles, if it makes sense to include them and present them to the board for their consideration, we're going to do that.
Okay. But you don't have information now that you can share with us?
I think I just did.
Not really, because I asked a specific question about what components of habitat, open space, or reclamation, or excuse me, or recreation were you contemplating for Reach B? I didn't get an answer.
No,
to
you
that
asked,
question.
are we looking at including some of these components? And I answered yes.
Okay, so then now the next question, of course, is I'm just asking what you're proposing in Reach B, or what you're considering in Reach B.
It depends on the alternative that's selected.
Yeah, I think you're putting the
Right.
cart before the horse. We need to do the geotechnical evaluation and figure out what fixes are even feasible. Once we've done that, then we can start looking at funding. But first of all, we have to understand what a feasible fix is for each reach. And so we're not there yet. We're still taking borings, we're still making that determination. So we don't have a design for each reach yet until we get all the geotechnical information analyzed and we figure out which fixes are even feasible for each reach.
What I would like to offer, though, is the meetings that we talked about tonight, next month's meeting, and then more specifically the January meeting, where we're going to lay out some of these possible alignments and talk about some of these factors. That'll be the time where we'll be able to present that information. It's just not, I can't present that today. We're not ready to do that presentation today. But I would encourage you to come to that meeting. That's when we'll have plans available, plan sheets, and we'll be able to really talk in more specific detail about what project components we're looking to move forward.
Okay, well, I thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to say, however, that given that for the clients that I represent, what's at stake here is losing their homes and their lifestyle and everything that they have worked for so far in their lives, which is kind of a big thing. We would like to have the information at the earliest possible occasion, and we continue to request from you as the chair that information be provided ahead of time. This flood control progress report is dated October 28. So it was prepared ahead of time. We could have, and perhaps it's posted, but I didn't see it. And we would like not to walk into a meeting and be presented with information for the first time that in fact had been ready for a period of time. And this is the only way that the public input can be effective, is if we're knowledgeable, and then we can be helpful. So I'd like to ask for your help as a chair of the committee in making sure that we get information ahead of time. I don't want to walk into the January 26th meeting or the meeting in December and get a handout or see things up on a screen for the first time when so much is at stake here. I mean, this isn't a normal construction project in Reach B for these people. It is not. It's not a normal public works project. It's their whole lives. It's their children. So I think that under these circumstances that we ask for that consideration. And also, if you want to have good public participation, then we need an opportunity to read your materials so we can ask good questions. So thank you. I appreciate very much your taking the time and giving that opportunity for dialogue here. It's very much appreciated. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll get as much information as we possibly can to you as quick as we can.
Really
so that you can
appreciate
kind of plan what's happening and this type of thing. And but remember, if you have any ideas or any suggestions, you call Michael or his staff, and they will answer your questions or set up a meeting with you and anybody else that wants it. And we just want to get as much information to you as we can. As we get it, same thing you have, as we get it, you would
like it early too. Well, we would very much appreciate that. And then as to the other meetings that are referred to in this report, I'd appreciate knowing if it's possible to have public participation at those meetings as well, and if so, the time and the place. And then just one last comment. I was a little surprised at the timing that you would be starting appraisal and eminent domain process before the EIR was done in January of 2013. It won't be until the EIR process is done and the alternative is selected, that you will know for certain what the alternatives are. So I was a little surprised at that timing. It seemed, I kind of wondered how you could know what you wanted to do before the environmental review process was completed. So if you could give that some consideration as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Questions. I have a couple.
Do you have questions?
I do. Mike, how can we speed up the GRR process? I mean, it seems like it's taking so long, and the GRR process is extremely important if, especially for federal funds. So is there a way to speed that up? I mean, why does that have to sit out there until, we'll say, 2015?
Well, we are targeting taking on more critical path items to help move the process forward. It's difficult. The Corps seems to be putting up more hurdles throughout this process.
No, exactly, right.
We were supposed to have our F3 milestone in November next week, and that's been postponed because we're getting more questions from headquarters about how our GRR fits into the entire Central Valley system-wide plan that either the Corps is going to look at and the state is currently looking at. So it's making it complicated. Our response, we haven't seen the actual questions yet. We're waiting for those to come any day now. We're hoping to help the Corps answer those to help move the process along. But we're trying to take on as much in-kind services as we can. So that's our way of taking on critical path items and moving the process forward.
Is it a funding issue at a federal level?
Not currently. Funding hasn't been an issue, no.
Okay. The Corps' budget has been amply supplied and all of those kinds of things from the present administration or past administrations, and so it's really not a money issue?
It's not a funding issue currently. The appropriations have been coming in to keep the study moving forward. We are looking at the state. They may want to try to move all studies that are currently going on, move them forward quicker, and we're starting to sit down with the state to understand what that means from their perspective. Are they going to try to take on some of the work, some of the critical path items of work to move the studies forward? Or are we going to bring on maybe bigger consultant teams to move the studies forward? The Corps tries to keep a lot of the work in-house, to keep their people funded and staffed. So we're looking at that now. I think I talked to the board last month about the federal crediting issue that could impact early implementation projects. And getting through these federal authorizations, getting these to Congress quicker helps avoid some of those issues. So we're partnering with the state on that.
Okay. And in your presentation, I didn't see anything that pertained to FEMA. And FEMA could become a big issue for our community because, I mean, if we don't get an A99 or whatever, there's some consequences.
The latest information we have from FEMA on their remapping, we hear they may be putting out for public review their floodplain modeling that they have been working on, that I've been briefing the board on. We should be seeing that either next month or early next year. That'll go through a public review process. We'll have our technical team take a look at that and provide input into it. That process needs to be completed before they go back to their remapping operation for West Sacramento. So it's going to take a little time. We're hoping it takes longer than what FEMA hopes it takes, but they're moving it forward is our understanding.
So, but I mean, if we get work done and then the FEMA criteria as far as, what, 50%? And if you have 50% of the work done, then they consider, you're really making an effort. And so expedite some projects along so that we don't get the FEMA mapping that we really don't want.
That's exactly it. The quicker we can complete levee improvements and the more miles we can complete, the better off we'll be from a FEMA remapping standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, locally, from our dollar point of view, how are we fixed financially as far as West Sacramento is concerned?
Well, we're working very closely with MBK, our consultants, on our financial analysis and how we partner with the state to leverage our monies. And that's what we'll be presenting to this board in the next several months in terms of, as we cost out this Southport project, as we figure out exactly how much local dollars we have to invest into that project, and then how much cost share we're going to get from the state. That's when we're going to know how much of the 6 miles we can build. Can we build all of it? If we can't build all of it, how much can we build? And that's when we'll present that information for the board to make decisions on. But right now, we're looking good from a financial standpoint. Unfortunately, there's no development happening, so we're not getting any monies out of the in lieu fee that the city had set up on for new development. We're strictly looking at our assessment right now. That's our main funding source.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And Ken, that was very good, really. I'm down to informational items. And at this time, I would ask for a resolution establishing the city council chambers as the location for our meetings. And the board will change it by future resolution as required.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's appropriate. I mean, I think that as we move forward, there's certainly going to be a lot of interest. There's a number of folks that are affected, and there's going to be a lot of interest, and we need space. The space that we have over at the WSAFCA quarters over there by where the chamber is it's not as comfortable. Some people don't get to sit, and I mean, we want to make these meetings as comfortable as possible, so that everybody can get as much information as they can. And I think a venue like this works really well. I don't know what other city meetings are in the process for at 10:30 on the second Thursday of a month. But I mean, if something can long range be plugged into that kind of situation, I think that it really works out better for everybody. Anyway.
Okay, I need a second. Second. Been moved and seconded that we establish a resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
So
the ayes have it.
So what will we do? Will we just direct staff to put forth a resolution of some kind of intent or whatever?
We can just reflect it in the minutes. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any more informational items?
I did want to point out that tonight's presentation will be going up on our website if the public wants to download that and have access to it. And we will do, when we put the agendas together and the associated materials that go with that, they are forwarded to the board on Fridays, so we'll commit to put those up on the website every Friday. They usually go up by at least 3 o'clock on Fridays, so that would be the opportunity for the public to download that information and have access to it. So I wanted to point that out.
As you probably noticed, we didn't use the 3-minute rule on talking. We want people to voice their opinions, but if there's a lot of people in here that have questions, we're going to reduce it the the freedom of speech, so to speak, at the podium. And we just have to do it, otherwise it just keeps stretching the meetings out and out and out. So based on that, I'm glad everybody showed up that did show up today, and thank you very much for coming. Meeting's adjourned.